Shavua Tov. Good morning, everybody. We are right now doing the last two of the. We're finishing up Bezut Hashem. Our period of studying Kabbalah Shabbat. We've been doing Lecha Dodi instead of the Psalms of David HaMelech. We're doing this beautiful poem of Shlomo Alkabetz, Halevi Alkabetz, and we talked a lot about the mystics of the 16th century in Sfat and how their tfisat olam, their worldview, really was the basis for a lot of the material in this beautiful, beautiful, amazing poem. And we got to last week the end of the middle section of the poem. The beginning of the poem is welcoming the beloved. Perhaps it means Shabbos, perhaps it means HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we talk about the greatness of Shabbat. And then we start in the middle five, which is basically half the poem, in the middle five paragraphs, Charuzim, stanzas, we talk about Yerushalayim being rebuilt and Geula, redemption. And we ended last week with the stanza, V'hayulim shisa shasayich, and we're getting rid of all the bad guys. Now, until then, we talked about the building of the good stuff, and then we talked about getting rid of the bad guys. And then it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu yasis alayach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is joyous over you, and that's Yerushalayim, kimsos chatan al kala, like someone comes to a wedding and is joyful over or concerning the groom and the bride. I mean, in English we say bride and groom, but here it fits better with the meat and say chatan al kala. And so what I believe strongly, not everyone agrees with what I'm going to say right now. What I believe strongly is we have now shifted our attention to what got hinted at the beginning of the poem, which was the coming of the beloved, which is, I believe, an oblique reference to marriage, to a chatuna, to a wedding ceremony. And now we're into the concept of, we're joyous about chatan and kala. Now, the next paragraph, many people believe, is a reference back to the Messianic period. But I'm going to say, I think it's already a reference to celebrating a wedding, and you'll see why in just a moment. So the next to the last, the penultimate paragraph, Yamin usmol tifrotzi, right and left tifrotzi, spread out. Okay? Now, this idea of spreading out right and left, of course, is a reference to yesterday's Torah reading. Ufaratzta yama v'kedma tzavana v'negba. And you should spread out, north and south and east and west. Here it's saying left and right. But it's the similar concept of spreading out. And this idea of spreading out is a messianic vision of Jews spreading out, but Yerushalayim spreading in the way it gets described, mostly in Zechariah, but also to a small extent in Yeshayahu. Yerushalayim itself is going to grow. So that's what many people say we're talking about, and we haven't left, therefore, the concept of Yerushalayim and Geula. However, when we look at the pasuk in Yeshayahu that this quote is taken from, and that is Isaiah, Yeshayahu, Nun Dalid Gimel, Ki Yamin Usmol Tifrotzi, for you shall spread out to the right and to the left, V'zarachad Goyim Yirosh, and your offspring shall dispossess the nations, okay? But what it said earlier, the previous pasuk is, Harchivi Makom Ohalecha, we're enlarging the site of your tent, V'yuriot Mishkanotecha Yatu, and we're spreading out the size of your dwelling place. So Ufaratzta here is not necessarily Yerushalayim per se, it's the tent. I think that this pasuk is referring to the chuppah. Ufaratsta, let's spread right and left. Let's spread the chuppah for the chatuna. And we want the chuppah to be very big because in our case, the Kala is the entire Jewish nation. You got to get us all under that chuppah. So I think that that's what it really means. I mean, obviously, that other opinion is very strong, and I can't say it's wrong, but I think that once Rav Alkabetz got to talking about the joy of a wedding, he now stayed focused on chatunot. And that's what's going on here with Yuminis Multifrotzi. We're spreading out the wedding canopy, the chuppah. Ve'et Hashem ta'aritzi. And now we come to a problem. And this problem started at the beginning of the poem and continues now to the end of the poem. Who's the Chatan and who's the Kala? And we seem to be referencing both the incident at Mount Sinai, when Jews married God, and that was a Chatuna, and there the chuppah was Har Sinai, that according to the Midrash, Har Sinai was lifted over their heads as the chuppah, also as a threat, but okay, that's a separate aspect, that Akash Baruch lifted up the mountain, was standing underneath it, and that is the chuppah over our heads. So it could be that ta'aritzi God. Now, what does ta'aritzi mean? Now, of course, that's also a quote from Yeshayahu. Once we got through the first couple of paragraphs, most of the quotes in the poem are referencing Sefer Yeshayahu. So here, in front of me, my translation from Koren is, and God you will revere. However, in the JPS, where we have the actual pasuk, which is, again, Yeshayahu, Perek Chavtet 29:3, it says, men will hallow the Holy One of Jacob and stand in awe. So Ya'aritzu is to be in awe according to JPS, and it's revere according to Koren. I would say Ya'aritzu is this concept of showing tremendous kavod, recognizing the value of the immense value of what you are describing, and I think it means to show esteem to Hashem. So is Hashem the Chatan like at Har Sinai, and we are the Kala, or perhaps HaKadosh Baruch Hu is under the chuppah and he's the Masada Kedushin? I'm not sure, but I think at the end of the poem, we are more emphasizing the concept of the Jewish nation is coming together with Shabbat. And therefore, that's the wedding that is taking place at the end of the poem. So what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing under the chuppah is, of course, he's Messiah the Kedushin. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in charge of the ceremony. So this is right and left. It's got spread out. We have tremendous esteem for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this spreading out, this event is under the auspices Al Yad Ish Ben Partzi. This wedding, in other words, so you've got a wedding. I think it's a wedding, or it could be Geula. They both fit, but I think we're talking about a wedding. So we're setting up. The caterers have set up the chuppah. We've got this Masada Kedushin, and now we're saying that this entire event is being paid for. The sponsor of this event is Al Yad Ish Ben Partzi, that person who is the descendant of Peretz. And of course, the descendant of Peretz is David HaMelech. Peretz is the son of one of the twin sons of Yehuda and Tamar, and Peretz is the head of the household that goes through Boaz to David HaMelech, And so Ben Partzi in this case, of course, is Mashiach, is Melech HaMashiach Ben David. And so, but the idea of going back to Peretz is very important, because this is again the Ufaratsta, Partzi, Peretz means that. So that all of this idea of the grandiose enlargement of Judaism, both spiritually and physically, is part of the legacy of the family of David HaMelech. But it's not only their legacy, it's also their destiny, because this is something that's going to again take place in the future. So we inherited this idea that David HaMelech was the spreader, of Judaism, and so were his descendants. But in the future, it's going to be even more so with that final descendant of the family, who will be Melech HaMashiach. And therefore, that person will be, the sponsor, if you will, of the patron of this Chatuna, which is between the Jewish people, and in this case, I believe Shabbat, but it doesn't make any difference. But it means the entire nation will be underneath this kuppah. It's sort of to me, this is like the vision of Leviathan on Sukkot. That next year we'll all sit in the sukkah together, all of the Jewish nation, in a sukkah that's made out of the hide of Leviathan, this massive whale-type ocean-going animal. The image doesn't appeal to me too much, but the sentiment of all Jewish people being together, I guess it'll smell like herring inside. Okay. V'nismecha v'nagila, and we are going to be very, very joyous. Nismecha, according to the Malbim, simcha is the term that's used for when the joy is personal, that you are the beneficiary of the simcha. You are part. That's what the simcha means, that you are very much personally involved. I personally think, and Rabbi Soloveitchik used to say this, that simcha is more spiritual joy, and nagila, which is singing and music and things of that nature, that kind of gila is more physical. And so both of those pshatim work out, but the idea that it's spiritual and physical makes a lot of sense, because that is, again, a Shabbat image, that we enjoy ourselves both spiritually, but also we make sure we put away the best food for Shabbos, that there's spiritual and physical pleasure on Shabbat. Now, before we leave this paragraph, Rav Kook says something fascinating, and we know this from Yaakov Moshe Chalap, who is perhaps the greatest of Rav Kook's students. There are a few that are in the caravan, and he likes the word partzi, pritza, and he says, in the footsteps of Mashiach, the generation of Ben Partzi, all the components, all the opinions will break out. In other words, for Mashiach, we have a negative term. Oh, he was Paratz Geder. Now, someone who's a maverick or a rebel is called, he broke through the fences. And so what Rav Chalap is saying, that the generation of Mashiach is going to be a generation of revolutionaries, iconoclasts, if you will. They're going to break the rules, because if we continue doing things by rote, then there's going to be stagnation. There's not going to be rejuvenation. There's not going to be the breakout of new and better things. Just like Yaakov Avinu was a revolutionary and by definition an iconoclast, he destroyed idols, so too the generation of Mashiach is going to throw off old norms and bring in new ideas. And I love this idea. And of course, Rav Chalap, was very much like Rav Kook, was viewing the return to Eretz Yisrael and now to Medinat Yisrael as a major step of changing the stagnation of the galut that we got stuck, centuries ago, and we can't move forward. We even have to dress like they dressed 300 years ago for some reason I don't understand, unless I sold Streimlach, then I'd understand it very well. But we've got to be able to move forward for Mashiach to come. That's the point that they're saying, and that's hinted by the term that is tifrotzi. So that for centuries, if not millennia, we have felt that the idea of Pertzah was dangerous. And when we were in Galut, it was. But now during Eretz Yisrael, it's time for new ideas and new customs and moving forward. And that's what's going to give up the breakout to the Messianic period. And that's being hinted at in our Pasuk that is being quoted here, Yominus Motifrotzi from Yeshayahu, and Shlomo Alkabetz is using that here as well. And even Mashiach is being referred to by the name of his progenitor who broke out, in this case from the womb, and pushed by his brother to get out. But this idea is of course very, very beautiful and very, very important. By the way, many of the mystics in Tzfat viewed themselves as as pathfinders, earth breakers to new ideas. And this was important, even though many of their ideas, they said, they're new, but they're returning to a concept that existed a long time ago. And everything that we do has to be within, within the rubric of Judaism. But nevertheless, this idea that the revolutionary period, the Messianic period is also going to be a revolutionary period is very powerful. Is very powerful. And this phraseology of this wedding ceremony is going to really usher in a tremendously new period of Jewish history, unlike anything that any of us has ever seen. And so now we're ready, like every good wedding, there is that moment of drama when the Kala appears. There were some wedding halls in America that made a big deal, out of this. The lights would dim, and then there'd be a spotlight, and so that's what's happening now. We've got that. We've built up to this dramatic entrance of the Kala, and so just like at a wedding, everybody gets up and turns around and goes ooh and ah as the Kala comes into the hall. That's what's happening right now. And that's the last, okay. Boi b'shalom ateret bala. Come in peace. Ateret ba'ala. You who are going to be the diadem for your chatan. You're not in any way less. You just make him more. And that's what's very, very important about the Shidduch and coming together. What's fascinating about this is a comment. Is a comment of Rav Chanina that in the Gemara that is perhaps the basis for the entire poem. And Rav Chanina said, "Let's go out of the town to greet Shabbos," and that's what they did in Tzfat. They would actually go outside the boundary of where people were living into the wooded area right outside, and to greet the bride, the queen. And he ended it with to greet the Shabbos bride, the queen, which is different than we say. Instead of saying Bo'ei Chala, he would say Boi Chala Shabbat Malchutah. And so that's what, in other words, it's Kala, but it's also the Shabbat queen, and it's clear the marriage is between us and Shabbat. And Shabbat is a teret, is our crown, our diadem. Okay? Gam b'simcha u b'tzahala. And so this is, it is both with joy and tzahala. My translation in front of me is jubilation. Okay. Again, it's like we're looking for so many different words for joy, but again, simcha is more the spiritual experience, and tzahala is more of the, the physical uproar of the music and the dancing, and that is the tzahala. Toch emunei am segula. This joy can only take place in a very limited audience. Other people might see this going on and not get it. People can look at, at Jews, not carrying and not driving and, walking on Shabbat, and they're just, what's going on here? In other words, it's this joy, this understanding is only amongst the emunei am segula, and again, that's a pasuk from Yeshayahu, okay? Amongst the believers of the nation, which in Sefer Devarim is referred to as God's segula. What's a segula? Again, in front of me, my translation is treasured people. A segula is something that is valuable, wonderful, but specifically dedicated to something. In other words, it's something that is a treasure, but might not be considered a treasure to somebody else. It's only considered a treasure to a person that gets it. In other words, you can go out in the field and you've got different people. One person finds a nugget of gold. Oh, that's a treasure. Somebody finds a plant. Oh, that's a treasure. Somebody else finds a certain kind of rock that says something about the history of the area. So, wow, that's a treasure. You think about if you go to you go to an archaeological dig and you're sifting through the stuff, and to a layman they find anything, it's a treasure. But to the expert, they have to find something very, very specific, and then if you go, wow. So segula is something which is treasured and valuable, but in a very limited sense, that it's relative to the person. So the segula is together with the emunah. The treasure that is being found is only understandable, of course, to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, but to the people that are believers. If you're not believers, then you don't see necessarily the value in this. I know some psychologists might say, oh, resting one day a week is cool, or some sociologists say how important it is for the family structure that you get together. But as something which is really special and very, very valuable, it's only really to the Am, which is Balei Emunah. And of course, we end the poem, and I hope I left myself enough time for my wrap-up. We end the poem with Boi Chala, Boi Chala, and at that point, there are many different minhagim. It depends on the size of your shul, but generally, we have turned around, and at Boi Chala, my custom, if I have room, is to walk a couple of steps, Dalet Amot, if possible, towards the door, to bow, then turn around and walk back and bow again. So that's my custom on Boi Chala, Boi Chala. There is another custom that is actually brought down by the Anaf Yosef in the Otzerat Tefillot, one of the great Meforshim of Siddur, and he has one long extended comment on this paragraph. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I'm going to do two little parts of it. He starts off by saying, Bawi b'shalom ateret bala. He says, at this point, Yomah ha'adam b'simcha atzuma ad ma'od. This declaration should be said with profound joy. Ki hacharu zeh mikabel ha'adam nefesh yitera deleil Shabbat Kodesh. It's at this moment when you turn towards the door, when you are ki'ilu, greeting the Shabbat bride, you are simultaneously being absorbed or absorbing the nefesh yitera, the extra spirituality, the extra soul of Shabbat. And that happens at this instant, so that we should be extremely joyous spiritually on a very high level at this moment. And then he says, I'm skipping a bit, and then he says, V'yome gimel pa'amim bawi chala. Interesting. So we say it twice. We are, at least my minhag, if possible. Sometimes the shul is crowded and you can't, although who goes to crowded shuls these days? But anyways, I try to walk a couple of steps, dalet amot, 6 feet. But of course, that takes me out, into somebody else's 2 meter. But anyways, but normally I would do this. So walk, and then you bow, and then you turn around, come back, and bow again. That you have escorted the bride into the Beit Knesset, the chuppah, into the wedding ceremony, and that okay, so that's cool. But he says no, you say it 3 times. Hainu bet pa'amim b'kol. You say it twice out loud, just like I just described. Upa'am shlishi yoma balachash. Say it a 3rd time to yourself. So what's that? Va'ama gimel pa'amim boi chala yomer Shabbat malchata, and at the 3rd time you add that Shabbat is the queen. V'yamshichet atzmo b'machshavto, and you extend yourself in your thoughts towards Shabbat. So it's like twice you're saying it to everybody or with everybody, and once you're saying it to yourself. And when you say it to yourself, you're also saying, Shabbat is the queen. Which is, in other words, it's not just something going on outside. We do a lot of external things, whether it's shaking the lulav or sitting in the sukkah or eating matzah. But what the Anaf Yosef is trying to push as an agenda, a lot of these external things, bowing for this and saying that, we have to also internalize it. Saying it for the 3rd time not only makes it chazaka, 3 times bam 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 makes it kavua, but it's also that 3rd time is to ourselves. Yes, we did it outside with everybody else, and that's beautiful and that's wonderful, but it's got to be going on inside me too. And hopefully that reality is going on. There is another custom, and that other custom, which many Sephardim have, was done by, apparently, according to some people, by the Rabbi himself, I'm sure by Yochai, by the Ari, the Ari Kadosh in Sfat, and didn't say Boi Chala, said Boi Chala, Shabbat Malchata, and of course that is quoting the Gemara about Reb Chanina. So if you really want to believe that the beginning of the poem, going out and saying, "Come in, my beloved," is referencing Reb Chanina's minhag of going outside the city, and when he greeted Shabbat as he watched the sun set over the horizon, he said, "Oh, Bawish Shabbat Malchata." And so some people, instead of saying Bo'ei Chala, like is our custom, and like the Anaf Yosef explained, have that separate minhag. But the interesting thing is, let's say you said Shabbat Kala Malchuta. Okay? Well, that gives you Rashi Tevot Shchem. Shabbat Kala Malchuta, Malka, in Aramaic it's Malchuta. So Shchem, and what an interesting thing, and I'm only perhaps bringing this up because it's actually this week's Parsha, that the initials give you Shchem. And Rav Kook points out that it was in Shechem that Yaakov Avinu made Shabbat for the first time. We know there is an idea that the Avot kept all of Torah before it was given. This idea is mentioned specifically, was not yesterday, but a week ago in Toldot, that the Avot kept all of the mitzvot and Torot from Hashem. But according to many Meforshim, including the Ramban, that was only in Eretz Yisrael. So it was only when after the meeting with Esav that Yaakov is actually back in Eretz Yisrael for Shabbat. And so Shabbat Kala Malchuta, Shechem, that was the first time he ever made Shabbat. Now he may have experienced Shabbat with Yitzchak back in either Hebron or Beersheba, but he never made Shabbos until this. And it's based on the pasuk that it says that he v'yavo b'shalom el ir Shechem, that he came in peace to the city of Shechem. And so according to Rav Kook, based on Kabbalistic sources, it meant that he was celebrating Shabbat. After all the difficulties with Lavan and Esav, and next coming up are going to be problems, with Dinah and Rachel's going to die. A lot of terrible things are going to happen next in this week's Torah reading. But he had Shabbos, and it was in Shechem, and that's the hint at Shabbat Kala Malchuta, that Yaakov Avinu was commemorating Shabbat for the first time. And again, everybody does whatever is their minhag, but I happen to prefer what is mostly Ashkenaz, which is Bo'ei Chala, and I've begun saying it a third time to myself before we start to sing. And it's at this moment that we are really being Mikabel Shabbat. So just one halachic note at this point. Two things happen now. Number one, it depends on the time. If many of us are getting to this point way after sunset and therefore it was already Shabbos, but let's say it was earlier, especially in the summertime, which you go to an early minyan, this is when you're really Makabel Shabbos. That's number one. And number two, the other idea that at this moment we're accepting Shabbos upon ourselves. Not only should we have this simcha atzuma, in the words of the Anaf Yosef, but also that's why we now at this point greet the mourners. And because the mourners weren't supposed to go out and around and about during their week of Shiva, but now since it's Shabbos, there's no public avelut, there's no public mourning, so at this moment they come and this moment they can come out. And now in America it's usually very weird, because what happened was they were already there for mincha because they wanted to say Kaddish, and then they left and came back in. So it's a little bit of a weirdness. However, at this in Eretz Yisrael, it's very common that there's a minyan in the house for mincha, and they really only did come at this moment, and this is the moment when we're greeting them, because now it's permitted for them to come out. Some people would say that we can still give them nichum because it's not 100% Shabbos, because really it's 100% Shabbos when we say Mizmor Shel Yom Shabbat, the next line in the davening, but already they can come out because we have been Mikabel Shabbat, but we can still give nichum for this couple of seconds at this moment. So as we're ending, I want to just share with you something from Steinsaltz, Oliver Shalom. Rav Steinsaltz wrote a 2-volume book. I only have the first volume. If anyone knows where I can get the second, please let me know. Called Hasidor V'Hatfilot, Hasidor V'Hatfilah, and it's very nice. And he in it he also talks about many prayers. I'm going through with my wife. We're going through all the brachot and Shmon Esrei. And there's a lot of interesting things in the book. He's so clear, but he also has a piece on Lecha Dodi. And at the end of it, he says, "Hashabbat mitueret harbe b'divrei chachamim." Shabbat is described many times in the words of our sages, u'b'divrei hamekubalim, and in the words of the mystics. Ki me'ein olam haba is described many of the times, both by the regular scholars of Torah and Halacha and the mystics, as me'ein olam haba, as a little piece, as a Vorspeise, like a sample of the world to come. Yom HaShabbat hu be'etzem ha'av tipus shel ha'olam haba. It is the paradigm of what's going to be Olam Haba. And that's important for us to think about because it should affect our personal behavior on Shabbat and attitude toward Shabbat. Zman HaGeula HaShlema. It's the time of the total, complete redemption. Uba'od HaGeula nitpeset b'shlav acher shel metziat ha'olam. And you have to understand that Geula is something that takes hold in shlav, in stages. And we're recognizing a different stage in the mitziyut, in the reality of our world. Shlav, a stage, shebo kol ha'olam kulo mitaleh l'darga gavoa yoter. It's a stage in which the entire world is raised to a higher spiritual level. Harei af Shabbat hi me'ein zeh. And Shabbat is supposed to be me'ein, a little bit like drawn from this idea. Ke'ilu this. Geula b'za'ir anpin. It is Geula. Now Za'ir anpin is a Kabbalistic description of one of the manifestations of Hashem, and it's called the young or the small face. But it means it's like Geula written with a small g. It's a smaller version of a greater concept. Shichror haguf v'yoter mizeh shichror hanefesh. Shabbat is a liberation of the body. Liberation. I don't go to work. I don't do all of these creative acts. I put those in abeyance, for 25 hours. But more than that, it's a liberation of the soul. Va'aliyata l'dagat elyona yoter, and an ascension of my nefesh, my soul, my neshama, to a higher plane. It ascends to a higher plane. I'm supposed to physically do things to encourage my soul to feel that it has really risen to a higher place. HaShabbat v'Hagula hein efo shnei tzadim shel davar acher. That Shabbos and redemption are indeed two sides of something else. What is it? What is that something else that we're really trying to achieve? And one of the things that makes this achievement possible, it's not that we're trying to do something that no one has an idea what it is. What we're doing is Hachzarat HaMetziut El HaToher Rishoni. What we're trying to do on Shabbos is return our reality to an original purity. Now, is that original purity the Garden of Eden? Okay, fine. Or is that original purity that moment at Mount Sinai when whatever negativity entered humanity through the sin of Adam Arishon, the sin of Adam and Eve, that we lost it. That negativity that we achieved by sinning and being thrown out of the Garden of Eden, that negativity is called zuhama in Kabbalistic writings. In modern Hebrew, that'd be pollution. But it means this something negative happened to us when we sinned and got thrown out from the Garden of Eden. So at Marmar Sinai, that zuhama was gone. We lost it. We were pure again, and we felt different until the sin of the golden calf, and it came back, and now we're still trying to get rid of it. But on Shabbos, we're supposed to feel the possibility of returning to that original state of grace, of goodness, of purity. And in other words, we couldn't accomplish Shabbos if it wasn't something that's somehow within human experience. It's saying that we're experiencing a little bit of the Geula, Shlema, B'meira B'yameinu, that's wonderful and that's true, but that's something we can't grasp. We don't know what that's like. But somewhere in our Jewish DNA, we know what it's like to feel that our neshama is pure. That's what we're trying to renew. That's what we're trying to feel on Shabbat. Yetziah me'ever l'tchum shel ha'amel v'hachet. We're trying to depart beyond the boundaries of workaday, amel, work, effort of that time. V'hachet, and sin, l'mitziut shoneh, shekol kulo oneg, to a new reality that everything is pleasurable on a physical and spiritual level. And I'm almost done, and I'm also running out of time, but I just want to read one more sentence from Reb Steinsaltz later on in this short essay. Hashir, this song, the song that we've been, this poem that we've been trying to analyze these past couple of weeks, Naseh efo harbe me'ever l'shir b'shevach yom Shabbat. This song poem is a lot more than just a paean to the glory of Shabbat. It is. It does that, but it does a lot more. It's almost like those infomercials at 2:00 in the morning. You get that, but not only that, you're getting much more, which is the hareu shir shel devekut amuka. When you really read and pay attention and try to understand and even analyze the poem by this holy soul, Rav Shlomo Alevi Alkabetz, it's really a song of profound attachment to Veikut, union, if you will. Shokesha Ahava, it's establishing the bond of love Bein ha'adam va'elokim, between a human and the divine and God. So that's what we're trying to do in the poem. We're not only trying to say, isn't Shabbos wonderful? And we're comparing it to greeting royalty. We're comparing it to the Geula Latid Lavo, B'meira V'yameinu, the redemption that should come speedily in our days. And to a wedding, all of those things are true. And isn't Shabbos wonderful? But in between the lines, when we start to talk about HaKadosh Baruch Hu as our beloved, when we start to think about how much we love HaKadosh Baruch Hu and how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us and Klal Yisrael, that should bring us to a whole new level. And that's what Shlomo Alkabetz is trying to do. The Shlom, the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, Rabbi Yeshayahu Horowitz, who lived not in Tzfat, but lived in Europe but made Aliyah to Tveria in around 1615, a generation or two after Shlomo Alkabetz, who died in 1584. When he was writing about Lecha Dodi, he said, you know what? There are a lot of poems that were written about the greatness of Shabbos. And many of them have become, of course, our Zmirot at our Shabbos meals. So we have some of them, but some of them we've lost. He said there are a lot of them. But according to the Ari, he says, even though we don't have the Ari saying, but the Shloss says, according to the Ari, none of them bring you to the Veikut im Hashem. None of them bring you to this resonance and connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu like Lecha Dodi. He said many of those other poems, by the way, some of them include the words Lecha Dodi because they're all hearkening back to that minhag of Reb Chanina in the Gemara. But none of them achieve the spiritual level and schlep us along to achieve that spiritual level like Lecha Dodi does. And I just hope that that these couple of weeks of learning it together. By the way, it has deepened my understanding of the poem and the song, and I hope it's done the same for the rest of you. And I just hope that when we chant this amazing poem on Friday nights, it'll mean more to us and hopefully deepen our understanding of the poem, our relationship with Shabbos, and most importantly, our Dveikut in HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Hashem. So thank you all very, very much for joining this morning. Next week, we're going back to Psalms, okay? This is not much of a detour, but a little bit off our track. And next week and the week after, those 2 weeks, I want to do a poem we've done before, but it's always different, and it's Psalm 30, and of course that's in honor of Hanukkah, which is coming up in just under 2 weeks.